For several decades, China has been lurking in the shadows of the US, slowly building its power base in third world countries by financing mega projects to build infrastructure and giving generous loans. China has most certainly overtaken the United States in terms of influence in a lot of third world and developing economies. You see, a common caveat in the loan agreements that China is coming up with these countries, we'll see a lot of these countries losing their ports and other major state infrastructure if they don't manage to pay China back, which essentially puts these countries in a position where it's in their best interest to please China. And over the past couple of weeks, we've begun to see China flexing its soft power. In contrast to the more direct and coercive nature of hard power, soft power is the ability to obtain a desired outcome through attraction rather than by coercion or payment. All the sweetheart deals that China is dishing out to third world countries, it's all been part of a play, China's secret plan for world dominance. It looks like after decades of slowly building power in all the countries that nobody cared about, China is finally ready to deal its death blow to the US and its economy. A key ally for China is another former communist state. I'm talking about Russia. At this point in time, the Chinese currency has quickly become the most traded form of currency in Russia, surpassing the US dollar, and the trend is starting to spread like wildfire. The conglomerate of states known as BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is essentially a collection of states which weren't able to make the cut and join the cool kids over at the G7. The 7 countries currently running the global world order as we know it. In a plot twist straight out of Revenge of the Nerds, all of the most economically downtrodden countries, which have been at the mercy of the US for years, with stunted economies that can't grow because of trade sanctions and other US policies, well, these countries have finally started to see a way out. 2 of the most sanctioned countries in the world, Russia and Saudi Arabia, already banging down China's door, trying to get a seat at the table of the new world order dominated by China. As a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia are distancing themselves from the United States, an alliance which goes back to the discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia and President Roosevelt. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the Chinese currency was recently greenlit for trade settlements as well as investing in Beijing, which will tremendously decrease Brazil's dependence on the United States dollar for international trade. In 2018, the Chinese currency did not account for any portion of Brazil's foreign reserves. By the end of 2022, the yuan accounted for just over 5% of Brazil's foreign reserves. But this isn't an isolated incident. The adoption of currencies other than the United States dollar to facilitate international trade is becoming a more common trend. Saudi Arabia, which had to face major sanctions after the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the world's leading oil producer, has publicly stated that it is open to talks to sell its oil in currencies other than the US dollar. This could see an end to the petrodollar, which is one of the most unspoken tools used by the United States to control the world. You see, the petrodollar system is a system in which oil exporting countries exclusively accept payments for oil exports in the form of US dollars. This petrodollar system has granted the United States a tremendous amount of influence globally. And historically, the United States has been willing to go to war, fighting to maintain their petrodollar system. American power and influence is clearly in danger. It seems like a lot of countries are fed up with the United States and are currently trying to opt out of a world dominated by US foreign policy. This is clearly what's going on in Iran right now. The country has suffered tremendously through American foreign policy and sanctions. Last year, Iran already announced that they have abandoned the US dollar completely in favor of the Russian ruble for all transactions with Russia. And they also mentioned that they have similar plans for their trade deals with Turkey, China, and India, completely cutting the US dollar out of trade with all their major trade partners. And Malaysia is currently on the same path. The country's prime minister has been quoted saying that there is no reason for Malaysia to continue to depend on the United States dollar. The Malaysian Central Bank is currently chalking out plans to start negotiating all trade matters in the Chinese currency as well as the local Malaysian currency, cutting the US dollar out of all future trade deals. Meanwhile, in Kenya, the Kenyan president has stated that Kenya will be reducing its demand for the US dollar by about $500 million every month. And the way that they're going to be doing this is by cutting back from purchasing oil in US dollars, and instead, Kenya will be using their local currency for oil trading and transactions. Things are starting to seem bleak for the United States and their dollar. Not to mention the collapse of major US banks, which has never been a good economic indicator. Silvergate Bank as well as Silicon Valley Bank both collapsed following bank runs. And lastly, Signature Bank was closed by regulators. Things are starting to seem very bleak for the United States dollar right now. There's most certainly a concerted effort underway right now to diminish the value of the dollar and at the same time the power and influence of the United States. The whole situation leaves US lawmakers in a catch-22. You see, if they did something to intervene in the spread of the Chinese currency, it would then make it clear that the US is too powerful and too power hungry. Countries will begin fleeing from the US dollar even faster than now. But at the same time, the US can't just sit back and do nothing while China begins its world domination. At this point, the only thing that the US can do is take a page out of China's book. Try and beat China at its own game of soft power. The United States is gonna have to adopt China's clandestine, under-the-radar tactics. And instead of always unleashing the stick to punish countries with sanctions and other economic punishments, the United States is gonna have to start using the carrot a lot more than the stick and start luring in countries into its sphere of influence with sweetheart deals and the type of offers that are so good you just can't say no. 2023 is gonna be a watershed moment for the United States. The Chinese yuan won't take over global trade overnight, but depending on how the leaders of the United States handle the next few months, China could be on track to dethrone the United States. You've been watching Liquidity. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your post notifications for all future updates, and don't forget to like and comment too. Thanks for watching.